All right, so I'm gonna go over some questions from the audience, and then I will kind of go over to my questions as well. But it is great to meet you. I've definitely been noticing some pretty big changes at Casper. I've been following the project since going all the way back as early as roughly September, October of 2021. There's
Nice.
definitely been a lot of hiccups down the road, but hey, it is what it is. It's crypto. That's what it is. So it's definitely great to meet you. I'm glad to have you on the channel. Glad to get some of these questions out of the way as well, because I know that a lot of the followers of the channel definitely want, some answers around a few things as well. So,
I'll hold my feet to the fire.
all right. Well, without further ado, I don't want to waste your time, and let's dive on in. So, from a follower of mine, he has 7 questions. So
Oh wow. Okay.
it's a little bit in depth, but they are some solid questions. Number one is how has and how will Casper implement and utilize ZK rollup technology going forward?
Okay. So you want to dig right into sort of the nitty gritty. So in our R&D department, we've done a lot of work on ZK rollups, and we have some sort of proof of like we're working on some trials, and we're involved in a number of consortiums around ZK rollups. The reality is that I don't see ZK rollups rolling out on Casper in like the next few months. This is more of a like a next year, later next year kind of thing.
Hmm.
Um, and but we're making good progress, and you'll see some. Actually, if you go on our news feed or on our Twitter feed, you can find links to articles from our R&D department on the work that we've done. So I'd be happy to link you to those as well via Twitter or otherwise.
Yeah, that would be great. I could actually include those in the description so that everyone can go check it out as well.
Yeah.
So number two, we have with RWI protocol and equity bricks, it appears that Casper is positioning itself as a real estate centric chain. Are there any other projects that you can think of that capitalize on this trend?
So let's correct that assertion first. I don't think we're positioning ourselves as a real estate centric chain.
Hmm.
We do obviously see real world assets as a very interesting and promising vertical. Um, but it's just that it's a vertical, right? So
Hmm.
we're positioning ourselves as an attractive chain for many different verticals, and this is one. RWI is one that we are very excited about. Should launch alongside Casper 2.0. And in addition to the real world asset piece of it, it'll bring a very attractive liquid staking program to Casper as well that makes use of new functionality that we're adding to Casper 2.0, which makes liquid staking um, sort of really truly native to the chain, and which makes it more performant, more secure, and just more interesting than some of these other implementations that we've seen.
That's awesome to hear, especially with how big tokenization has become. I've been talking about it for a little bit of time now, especially since Larry Fink said, "Hey, the Bitcoin ETF is not the big news; it's tokenization. Tokenization is the next big thing." So, I think that's great that Casper is really kind of getting into
Listen,
the. What was
It's
that?
it, it's been sort of a promise, right? I mean, people have been talking about this for years,
Hmm.
but it required more than just the blockchain industry to be sort of open to this, right? And we're now at a point where I think TradFi and sort of Web 2.0, broadly speaking, is starting to recognize this as a true opportunity. So it's definitely a vertical that we're very excited about.
Hmm. And even around traditional finance, I mean, the big thing about most of these asset classes is earning, real world yield on a lot of these things. So even when we think
Mhm.
about tokenization, it definitely takes us down the path to how can we mix this into the DeFi world? How can we get yield off of this and passive income? So tokenization just makes sense from that perspective, but also from even the fractionalization of, real estate, which is a liquid asset class that tokenization could ultimately make liquid.
100%.
So moving on to number three, we have with the rollout of Condor and the increased efficiency of gas fees or lack thereof, what changes, if any, will be implemented to incentivize the purchase of Casper over time?
So a couple things there. Just going to break down the question. So we'll go 3A, 3B, 3C, just to make this user of yours have even more exposure.
Hmm.
So Condor, first of all, when I started as the CTO of the association, we made a decision to stop using these sort of named releases. So Condor going forward is just Casper 2.0, right? And this user in particular is referring to sort of gasless transactions, or the way that it actually is implemented is there's a hold on your gas, so you still pay gas, but it gets released back to you over time. What this does is that you're essentially able to predict how much gas you need to run your application. Um, and you can now think of like sort of perpetual applications that sort of maintain themselves, right? Because you have a sort of a run rate of gas that over time gets feed back to you. Um, Now you have sort of forever running applications running on an amount of gas that you hold on the chain. Um, the second part of the question was about incentives to buy Casper.
Yes.
Listen, the Casper is the utility token of the network. As with most or all networks, it comes down to increasing utility, right? So we are very actively pursuing as much utility, meaning as many projects as possible. I think we've seen a lot of momentum in that area over the last couple of months. We're now seeing new projects announcing that they're launching on Casper on not quite yet a daily basis, but multiple times a week basis, which is really a nice change from where we've been prior to this. And as we continue to do that, the need to use gas and the need to use the utility token will increase alongside that.
Yeah, and I definitely oh, sorry. I actually definitely noticed that as well myself, because for the longest time there was a little bit of a meme going around with, the Casper name, like, hey, it is a ghost chain. So
The
the
ghost
name
chain, exactly. Yeah.
yeah, so over the last, I would argue, few months now, I did see the whole network kind of change. I mean, even with the retail focus, the big thing for me was making sure that people are aware that Casper Labs was not the Casper Association. They weren't in the driver's seat for the longest time. It felt as if they were the main ones.
Hmm.
But it's almost kind of like comparing it to the HBAR Foundation with Hadera. You have these foundations, you have these, private entities within the network that can definitely incentivize and accelerate the growth of the network. But again, it's not an end all be all situation. Even with the pivot to retail focus, I think that was such an incredible move because even right now, enterprises, institutions, they're still kind of locked out of this space because of regulations. So I've
They're locked
always,
out and they're also moving very slowly, right? It's
oh, definitely.
excuse me. That's been, I think, the main challenge for Casper Labs is they've been obviously pursuing for years now an enterprise-only focus. And it's just very hard to get enterprises to do anything quickly, right? Like there are like these large ships on an ocean, and sort of changing their course is quite difficult.
And I think that was even the argument with Hadera too. I mean, for the longest time, we kept hearing about enterprises, 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 but then you had the retail side that's like, hey, we're here trying to build, but we're not getting any grants, we're not getting any support.
Yeah,
Like, enterprises, sure that they're coming, they're on their way, but in the meantime, we definitely have to focus on who's actually paying, the network revenue, which is mainly the retail side. So
it's
I
retail, it's community, right? Like I think in the past, the community has not felt the love from the project.
mhm.
And that just doesn't work. It's a decentralized network, and by its nature, it requires an active and engaged community, and that's another big focus that we've shifted in the last few months.
Yeah, I completely agree. And even now today, being a long-term Casper holder, seeing everything unfold, I feel like now, I mean, I could speak my mind on it. I'm not too sure on, where you are, but I'm more bullish on the network today than ever before, especially, seeing everything starting to change after Casper Labs. And, I'm sure that I probably am speaking the mind of many Casper holders as well, seeing all the differences around. seeing the changes, and I definitely have to tip the hat to you because a lot of this definitely would not have happened without your leadership. So definitely have to give
Well,
you a +1 with that.
I appreciate that. Just to respond to what you said earlier, like where I am, you weren't sure. I can tell you that I can't be any more bullish than I am. I wouldn't be here otherwise, right? Like I have a pretty full dance card as it is. I'm here because I believe we can have a very meaningful impact and outcome here for the Casper network.
Hmm. That's awesome to hear. So on to number 4, we have, are there any projects that stalled production waiting for the release of, we'll just say 2.0. I know they keep saying Condor, but
Let's
2.0, and do you expect them to increase productivity now that the Condor release is imminent?
So yeah, there are certainly a number of projects that are waiting for Casper 2.0, including the RWI protocol, for example, which is making use of new functionality that's not available in Casper 1.x. So they are building now and ramping up now in order to be ready to launch alongside Casper 2.0. And with a rollout like that, it's really a major network upgrade, which means that we are working very actively with our ecosystem, which includes the exchanges and all the builders and market makers and anybody who basically interfaces with the network to be ready for when Casper 2.0 hits the network.
Hmm. And I've been keeping up with a lot of the technical efficiencies that it will bring. I really
Mhm.
think that this is where we start to kind of see a lot more of the ecosystem really kind of expand, even on the DeFi side. Because again, for the longest time, a lot of the efficiencies, although they were great comparing it to Ethereum, I feel as though we're kind of in that third generation stage of the space where we're we're stopping the whole idea of comparing it to Bitcoin and Ethereum. We're now comparing it to, all right, well, what about Solana? What about Hadera? What about, the XRP ledger? What about all of these other, DLTs in the space that are far more efficient? So, I think that this is definitely going to be a big change. And I think that it's going to accelerate the network for sure.
That's the
So,
plan.
number 5, we have, if so, which ones are you excited about and which do you expect will improve widespread adoption in terms of those projects that were stalled or potentially, coming to the network? I don't know if you can speak on this, but
So the if so refers to question 4. Got it. Um, so I'm excited about all of them. We're, as the association, very actively supporting them. That's another thing that we sort of recognize that for projects building on an L1 and particularly one that's not an EVM, right? Like you need to be actively involved and actively support these projects. And we're putting technical resources behind that. We're putting marketing resources behind that. And making sure that these projects can execute. And if there's any hiccups or anything that they need, we respond to that. I mean, including at the core protocol level. Right? So I mentioned RWI. They needed a specific functionality for on-chain liquid staking. And because we are sort of I guess it's the advantage of being somewhat smaller and perhaps more nimble than like an Ethereum, right? Like we have the ability to go in and say, well, listen, we make some changes to the protocol, we add a feature, and now you unlock a whole new use case. So
mm,
um, that's part of, I guess, the USPs that we bring to the table. We had some other interesting projects announced in recent weeks, like the Cowl network, a DeepIn network, which we're also excited about. There's a new AI project that announced in the last week or so that's doing an airdrop, I believe, in the next week. That's getting some traction with a lot of sort of KOLs on social, as well as listings on various exchanges. So there's a lot of momentum happening. Some of it will have to wait for Casper 2.0, and a lot of it is happening now.
mm. Yeah, I'm very excited for Cal. I've been following them for a little bit now, and it definitely looks promising. I know that a lot of people were asking me about the AI project and if they could trust the airdrop. I haven't looked too much into it, to be honest with you, but I know that maybe you have an answer on that. Do you think the airdrop is trustworthy?
So I've been in contact with the team. I know that the guys behind Shibu are also involved with this project, and obviously we've been working with them before. I've today gotten access to their source code, and we're taking a look at that. Yes, like it seems like a trustworthy project. And the airdrop, I don't necessarily see the risks associated with it, since there's no, I don't think there's any buy-in required. So
Mhm.
I'm not particularly too concerned with it.
All right. And over here we have number 6, and again, this is more so pertaining back to RWY. I'm very excited for the implementation of RWY, so Casper can finally reclaim and change the narrative without specifying. What's the time frame for mainnet implementation of RWY? And I would assume that this is also probably the same time around when 2.0 launches as well.
Yes, so I really see it as sort of a launch companion for 2.0 because it requires this new functionality, and that makes it also a nice way of showcasing that new functionality, right? So um, the contracts are more or less developed. The front end is being developed. The back end is being developed. The contracts are going to go into security audit here in the next week or so. So everything is on schedule with them. And then they'll start testing as soon as 2.0 hits testnet. I mean, obviously they're testing earlier, but people will be able to see it on chain when it hits testnet, and then launch alongside 2.0 on mainnet.
Now, also, just to kind of add my own question to this, are you in conversation at all with RWA.xyz to get real
No,
time tracking?
no,
All right.
but that's a good call out. I will actually make a note of that.
Yeah, I know XDC recently got added to the list. Stellar's been on there for a while with Franklin Templeton. I think that that would definitely be great to see you guys on there because, again, I know that a lot of the reporting process when it comes to like Cointelegraph and Coindesk, they've been
Yeah.
using RWA.xyz for a bit of time.
So I made a note of it, and we'll follow up on it. I did notice that CoinMarketCap has started reporting on their RWI protocol
Mm,
in recent weeks. So they've taken notice that there is some real-world asset activity on Casper. But reporting is definitely important, and we'll follow up.
definitely. So, number 7, and this is again the last question that we have from the overall followers. We have understanding that the current leadership is supposed to be temporary. Can you give us any indication of the type of direction that you'd like permanent leadership to take us going forward? Enterprise, corporate, commercial, utility, or others?
Okay, so again, I'll start with clarifying. So what we announced must have been now a couple months ago is that the current, or by now actually the previous board, but the board of the Casper Association was going to step down before December 1st. That actually happened on November 29th, for the record. And a new interim board would take its place. I am part of that interim board. I'm the president of the board, and we have two other board members, Matt Schaffnit, who was the CEO and CFO of the association, and a third member, Pascal Schmidt. Um, it's called an interim board because we set into motion a process to decentralize governance, and for which we've given ourselves a year basically to complete that. Hopefully, to obviously complete it sooner, but wanted to make sure that there's enough time to get this done. And it's actually we're taking a bit of an innovative approach to it. So the Casper Association as an entity is a Swiss regulated association, meaning that it's a membership organization, right? So to date, it hasn't had any members. It only has had a board. So for all intents and purposes, it's been governed by the previous board, three people, not necessarily accountable to anyone. That doesn't really that doesn't really sort of work in the decentralized world, right? Like
Mm,
this is a network. We believe there should be accountability towards the stakeholders in the network. And that's what we're trying to accomplish. So we're actually going to implement a membership program for the Casper Association, meaning that stakeholders in the network can become members of the General Assembly, as it's called. So that will be mainnet validators, certain exchanges, certain developers, etc. And the General Assembly is responsible for, among other things, electing the board, right? So a year from now, at the latest, there will be a General Assembly comprising of all the sort of stakeholders that you know and love in the Casper ecosystem, and they will be determining who sits on the next board. So that's step one. Step two is that we're implementing an on-chain governance program, whereby through delegated proof of stake, meaning validators get to vote, but validators are supposed to represent the sort of the intentions of their delegators, right? The people who stake with them. They get to vote on board proposals on chain with the weight that they have on the network. So if you are a validator and you represent 1% of the stakers on the network, then your vote counts for 1%, right? And we're implementing a legal mechanism whereby that on-chain vote will have actual legal weight in the governance of the association. Once we accomplish that, like we have an actually functional legal on-chain mechanism, will probably be one of the, if not the most sort of advanced decentralized governance organization in our industry.
Wow, that's going to be huge for Casper, especially with a
Yeah,
lot of even when we go back to like the upgradable smart contracts that Casper has, it really kind of puts you guys ahead of most, if not almost all, of the major networks in this space already. So that's definitely going to be a game changer. Now,
100%.
also with Davos coming up, are we going
Yes.
to see Casper represented at Davos?
So I actually just got back from Switzerland about 36 hours ago. Still working off my jet lag. I don't plan to be at Davos. We will have representation there, but the previous presence of Casper at Davos was really something that Casper Labs did as a sort of an enterprise marketing play.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so while the association was typically present there and maybe hosted some side events or supplied speakers, it wasn't really a Casper Network or Casper Association event. It was Casper Labs putting up an event for their enterprise prospects, etc. So don't expect something along the lines of what you've seen in years past when it was Casper Labs putting on an enterprise event.
All right. So on to some of the questions that I originally had typed up. I guess we could start off with, the big one, which is, do you have any information regarding why Casper Labs specifically left Casper and chose Hadera? Was it, technical? Was there, some major issue going on?
Yeah, and I think I've spoken to this in the past, but happy to summarize it. There was absolutely no technical or product-related reasons, right? So Prove AI, the AI governance product that Casper Labs was developing, they announced that publicly in May of this year and started developing it against the Casper network. And then around August, they were approached by Hadera and were essentially, to put it simply, made an offer that they couldn't refuse. And as a commercial entity with shareholders and equity holders, they had to take that to their board and evaluate it appropriately. And they did, and this is the conclusion that they reached. And again, from a commercial perspective, it makes perfect sense for them. But it's not based on any sort of, they weren't stuck not being able to get things done on Casper. Things were being developed and moving forward and ready to go until this deal popped up and they had to take it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, part two of that is I strongly believe that this transition has ultimately resulted in a better outcome, not just for Casper Labs in the commercial deal that they got, but also for the Casper network, right? Like you alluded to this sort of prior confusion around like who's who and who's responsible for what. That obviously is no longer there. Casper Association is the entity that's responsible for the network, for the protocol, for the ecosystem, for the node development, et cetera, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
There is only one entity in the ecosystem that has a treasury that gets from which it can grant projects and help projects. As you saw, we recently received sort of the remaining treasury of Casper Labs as well. So it's all a single entity. And because Casper Labs was always so focused on enterprise only, that sort of became sort of de facto the focus of the network, which I think we can all agree was, or perhaps has led to missed opportunities in the past. And our renewed focus on all the things that we've talked about in this conversation so far have really turned around the momentum for this project. And we see that on a almost daily basis, right? With new projects from various verticals starting to build and launch on Casper Network. Whereas perhaps from an enterprise perspective only, that certainly didn't happen in the past, and probably wouldn't have happened if things had proceeded the way that they were.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I completely agree. And even when it comes to, these projects like Prove AI, they sound great on paper, but it does take a long time for these types of things to fully launch, be adopted. I mean, even when we look at AI, they're still trying to regulate it. They're still trying to, utilize it in certain aspects of the enterprise space. So I still think Prove AI is probably a few years out from being, majorly adopted and utilized in a way that retail was kind of hoping for. Again, I get the whole idea of, pertaining to the narratives during alt season and the bull run
Yeah.
and things like that, but I still don't think that it's a huge hit on Casper. I think that with a lot of these new projects coming for the network, I think that these are going to be the main drivers, and I think that they're actually going to benefit Casper holders in a big way.
Listen, the sentiment around Casper has taken a 180, right? Like it was fairly negative, and it's almost exclusively positive now. And it's hard to imagine that the domain of AI governance creates a lot of excitement and positive sentiment amongst retail. I share your opinion in that perhaps while obviously sentiments are a real thing and people react emotionally to things, which is absolutely normal. Objectively speaking, I didn't and still don't see it as a high impact event for the Casper network. And if anything, this separation and transition has been very positive for the future outlook of this project.
Mm-hmm. And I think anyone that's a long-term follower of Casper, I think that they could also see that change happen in real time. I mean, I
Yeah.
saw it since the news. I mean, even though the price action wasn't the best, I mean, I still saw just like a huge 180 turnaround, and it definitely surprised me. A lot of people kept asking me like, "Hey, what do you think about this new project? What do you think about that new project?" I'm like, if we go back 2 years ago, there was practically no projects on Casper, and even leading up to now, there basically was just a few. So
Yeah.
I could definitely see the big change as well.
Yeah, and listen, I'm not supposed to speak about price, but I mean it's an objective truth that like from the low that we hit after that news broke, we're up 3-4x. So that's at least speaks to sort of the reversal of sentiment.
Hmm. Yeah, no, I completely agree. So I guess we could basically say that Casper is no longer essentially focused on enterprise. Is there still
Mhm.
any sort of path that we're still kind of on when it comes to the enterprise side, or are we just fully focused on retail?
Enterprise is a vertical that we believe in. It has its challenges, like we discussed. There are very long cycles to get anything done, and the once you even get something done, like you said, it takes a while for that to really take off. There's a lot of regulation and both sort of internal company regulations and processes and governmental regulations, et cetera, that you have to deal with. Um, and it doesn't necessarily always result in the types of on-chain activity and the related sort of sentiment that you would hope or you would get from other verticals. But it's a very valid use case. We're continuing to pursue them. I would say Equity Bricks, which you brought up earlier, is an example of sort of a quasi-enterprise project. We are also still active with sort of with TradFi through Actus. So we are in close discussions with them about some potential trials in the near future. And near future, please don't ask me next week, but this is a first half of next year kind of thing.
Mhm.
Um, and again, those are very real use cases that have absolute validity, and we'll continue to pursue them.
I'm glad that you brought up Actus actually, because I have a question here, and the question is, do you have any update regarding Actus connections, like for example with Nucleus Finance, or any moves being made on that end? But I assume that you already answered that with
Uh,
the new year coming. But can you expand on that a little bit?
Um, a little bit, but I can't like say a whole lot more. I mean, like I said, I was just in Switzerland, met with representatives of Actors there as well. There are a number of projects that are on the table that we're looking to launch trials with in the first half of the year. Um, the development has never stopped. There are implementations of Actus implementations that are ready to go. Um, and I think that's where I'll have to leave it for now.
All right, I understand. I understand. So,
Yeah.
with the whole idea of the exploit that did happen, because I do
hmm
kind of want to go back to the Casper Lab situation, because I do have two questions that pertain to this. Number one is, did the exploit diminish any confidence behind the security aspect of Casper? Is the integrity still there around the security? Can we trust it? Can enterprises trust it? If an enterprise did want to come over to the network and build tomorrow, will this halt or possibly bottleneck any partnerships in the future?
Um, so I don't think so. I mean, the security is obviously tantamount, and it's not just enterprises. Like if you are retail, you also want to feel like your funds are secure, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the exploit was something that, well, a couple of things we can say about that. First of all, it was a very obscure issue. We're still not entirely sure sort of how it was found because it was there from day one. This was actually a vulnerability that shipped when the network shipped. And in all the security audits that we've done and all the internal testing and everything, it never surfaced. So somebody was very very skilled, let's put it that way, in surfacing this. It did lead to us working with security auditors on digging into sort of the underlying exploit and similar vectors and trying to see if there's any other exploit lurking in the code base that could sort of accomplish similar outcomes. There were not. Um, and obviously you learn from your mistakes, right? So this is now something that's certainly sort of front and center and front of mind when we look at the 2.0 code base and evaluate sort of the security vectors in that.
Mm-hmm. And I assume with the new upgrade for the network, I feel like security is something that you could always improve on regardless, but it definitely does help retail sleep at night knowing that the network is secure, that this is a problem that will be fixed. But I definitely think
The,
that.
the, the, the the problem, by the way, when this exploit happened, the problem was found and fixed within like a couple hours.
Mhm.
Um, the reason why, and maybe this speaks to how seriously we take security, the reason why the consensus was halted for much longer than that, right? Like I think the network consensus halted for like 5, 6 days or something, is because we wanted to go back all the way to Genesis and see if there were any other sort of exploits deployed, because this required somebody to install a contract with like exploitative functionality, um, and see if there was anything else lurking, because we couldn't be sure that, like, since we know that this sort of vulnerability existed since day one, we couldn't be sure that there wasn't somebody who basically installed this 2 years ago and hadn't yet activated it, right? So we had to develop a whole new toolkit in order to walk the chain back all the way to Genesis, look at everything that happened since then, and make sure that there was nothing else lurking that could potentially sort of exploit this vulnerability, which is why it took a number of days to really come back and say, listen, we've not only fixed the issue, but we've also basically analyzed the entire chain to make sure that there's nothing else out there that could potentially harm you.
Mhm. Which definitely shows how serious, you guys do take security. I know that a lot of people were kind of complaining about how long it was taking. They were concerned. They were getting worried. But yeah, I mean, it's always great to take the extra, step and really kind of make sure that these problems, because again, they are very serious. You want to make sure that they
Yeah,
are fixed and those concerns are alleviated.
it's
So,
definitely security above all. So that decision to keep consensus halted while we were working through that sort of analytical piece, like we all stand fully behind that. It was absolutely a matter of like security first.
mhm. So, what is the plan behind the 425 million Casper from Casper Labs? I know that you guys put out a full report, but for those that, are not reading the reports, that are not up to date on it, what's the full plan behind this?
Well, the plan is, I don't want to call this a plan, but essentially this was returned to the Casper Association Treasury. And it's now part of the Casper Association Treasury, and we will actually in the same vein of like decentralized governance and more transparency, we've committed ourselves to putting out reporting in the future on sort of the what goes on in the background at the Casper Association, including how Treasury is spent on grants, on development and ecosystem development, et cetera, et cetera.
And that actually takes me to my next question, which is, are there any planned network accelerator programs for either DeFi, gaming, metaverse, or other related crypto sectors?
Um, I'm not going to be able to give you an answer on that quite yet. So we've halted our grant program, um, mainly because we come to the realization that grant programs aren't always the most effective, right? Like
Hmm.
we've seen, and I think other ecosystems have seen this as well. The incentives aren't always sort of fully aligned, right? Like if you are a grantee and you get some milestones, your incentive as a commercially minded project is to do the bare minimum in order to meet the milestones and then move on as soon as you're fully paid, right? So
Yeah.
we're trying to look at this really closely and see how we can create an incentive structure that basically aligns the parties more closely, so that we get fewer examples of like builders coming in order to sort of basically grant farmers, right? To come in, get a grant, do the bare minimum, and then move on to the next grant somewhere else. So I'm going to have to owe you an answer on that. But obviously, we are a part of the mandate for the Casper Association is to develop the ecosystem, right? So rest assured that there will be incentives and programs for ecosystem builders. We just want to make sure that we do it right, and that these will turn into long-term relationships with sort of continuous value created for the network, rather than sort of hit and run type relationships.
Yeah, I definitely agree with the grant issues, because I know that following the Hadera ecosystem, even the XRP Ledger ecosystem, a lot of the grants definitely get wasted. So I think that,
Yeah,
realigning that and really kind of, thinking twice about it, I think that that's awesome to see, because again, it is a
yeah,
big problem within this ecosystem. So
agreed.
with the stablecoin race, essentially, we hear a lot of these talks about RLUSD now. We have the stablecoin studio on Hadera. It feels like every single network is racing to have, their own stablecoin. We know that source and funds. launched or was looking to launch their stablecoin, which was, I believe, Casper USD. I just call it
CSPR, you
CUSD.
see. Yeah. Mhm.
Is there any updates regarding that?
Sure. So on the stablecoin front, I have three updates for you. So there is the Sarson Fund CSPR USD stablecoin, which they developed and launched, but have had, let's say, challenges sort of operating. And this is because Sarson Fund uh, isn't necessarily in the business of running stablecoins, right? Like they're a US licensed entity. They provide the banking for it, and they will continue to do that. Last week in Switzerland, Matt and I met with a number of market makers and discussed how one of them might take over the actual operation of CSPR USD in order to make sure that it is properly liquid, pegged, etc. Because that's the job of a market maker, not of a sort of licensed bank.
Hmm.
So that will happen here in the near future. We are also we have an implementation of USDC, and we're working with Circle on getting that reviewed and then hopefully launched. And then RWI protocol is actually launching its own stable coin over collateralized with real world assets behind it as well.
That's gonna be awesome. And that could
Yeah.
technically lead to, I mean, I know that right now it's really kind of still focused on the retail side, but I know institutional DeFi is starting to become a big hit around this space. Is there any plans to kind of focus on institutional DeFi, or maybe one of these projects that are, pushing DeFi like RWY? Are they kind of looking to align with that, or you don't really know
Uh,
anything
le-
about that?
well, let me just loop you back to our conversation about Actus, because institutional DeFi or institutional TradFi, now imagine having actual on-chain, sort of clearly defined financial instruments that can tap into stablecoins for settlement, for example. Um, that would be exciting, right?
Oh, definitely, definitely. I think I think a lot of people are kind of looking at institutional DeFi through a very small lens. They don't see the big picture. If we're thinking about how big some of these markets are, and if we're thinking about you know, how much this could do for these networks in terms of transactional value or even volume, I think that the network effects are severely overlooked. So I think that,
Yeah.
with Actus, potentially utilizing, stablecoins on Casper, or who knows what could happen, because we're still very early on when it comes to the TradFi space really kind of going fully on chain, but it could definitely blossom into something very exciting for Casper and a lot of these networks, because it is becoming a multi-chain feature at this point.
100%. And I really see Actus as a potential bridge between DeFi and TradFi.
Hmm.
Because, as you said, it's very hard for TradFi to even sort of participate in DeFi at all, mostly because they're so regulated and need to have more. Sorry, my phone was going on. More certainty about what actually is happening on chain, but Actus solves that for them. So we're actively pursuing those kinds of setups as well.
And talking more so about that, with regulations feeling as though we're kind of like right on the edge, especially in the US,
Mhm.
is there any, preparing happening for regulations? Any plans to talk with regulators? I know that Casper has been, for the longest time a compliant chain, but, is there any conversations going on?
Well, as you mentioned, there's a lot going on, especially in the US. And I think, particularly in the US, nobody necessarily really knows what's going to happen, right? Given the change of administration in about a month.
Hmm.
Um, but we're keeping a close eye on it. We are, as you mentioned, compliant. We're also going through MiCA certification. Um, and that potentially opens up some regulated exchanges, for example, as well. So but unfortunately, with the way that things are functioning in the regulatory space, it's more of a keep a close eye on it and respond kind of thing than really get ahead out of it because it's just so unpredictable.
Yeah. Now, talking more so about, exchanges and, thinking about going back to the whole idea of seeing major changes happening to Casper ever since Casper Labs
Mhm.
kind of, left. Recently, we've been seeing some moves being made around Casper being listed on Kraken. Is there potentially a bigger listing brewing for, say, for so Binance, Coinbase, or any, other tier one exchange?
Um, can't comment on any future listings, but wouldn't be surprised about future listings.
Okay. Yeah, I figured. Especially, now with the ecosystem blossoming, it's definitely a perfect time for exchanges to really, reap the early
Listen,
rewards.
we have a better case to make, right? Like the volumes are exponentially more than what they used to be. The momentum is there. The sentiment is there. So um, yeah, like I said, wouldn't be surprised.
Sounds good. And are there any potential partnerships in the works with names like Hadera, Ripple, Algorand, or any other chains? I know that recently we've been hearing a lot of talks about, the DREC alliance, where these chains are kind of coming together to push mass adoption forward through specific
So
things.
we are in a direct alliance with all those
Yep.
parties, right? So we're a member and continue to engage in it. Um, there's no one-on-one partnership with any of the names that you mentioned that's currently being discussed.
All right.
But in any sort of industry alliance where it makes sense for us to be there, we're there.
Yeah, I know that when the DREC Alliance first got announced, it was great to see all the names together because for the longest time I've been a big supporter of utility around this space because utility, in my
Hmm.
opinion, is where this space is basically headed, where it's going to be the main driver of value. And seeing Casper next to names like Ripple, Algorand, even Hadera, I believe Cardano was on there as well. It's
Yeah.
it's a big boost of confidence that we are on the right track. So I think that those sort of alliances are great for the space. It definitely allows the multi-chain future to become a reality. So
Absolutely. So I'll let you continue. Go for it.
right now, currently there is no one-on-one discussions. It's just mainly those alliances, correct?
Correct. Just on the multi-chain front, one of the parties that is launching on Casper in the next few weeks is Router Protocol, actually. It's a bridging protocol that will connect Casper with about 40 or so other chains. Um, but interestingly, what they have is something called Router Intents, which is basically a messaging protocol that they add on top of their routing, which allows you to basically bring in users and TVL from other ecosystems and not just bridge over the asset, but bridge over the asset and also attach essentially an intention to it, meaning you could bridge some USDC and in the same sort of atomic transaction, swap it into, let's say, liquid stake Casper and put it into a pool. So it's extraordinarily user friendly and fast, and it will really be a fantastic sort of accelerator of bringing more TVL into the Casper ecosystem.
That's awesome, especially considering that I've been following Router for a while. I mean, they have a massive ecosystem behind them, so
Yeah,
that's definitely going to be great, especially even for the DeFi side of Casper too,
yeah,
because they are mainly, I think that they're mainly connecting liquidity for a lot of these chains together too. So that's
hmm,
a huge plus one.
yeah. They've been great partners.
Are there any proposed changes to the tokenomics at all? I know that a lot of people complain about the 8%, year over year inflation rate. I've always said that the 8% is not that concerning at all, especially when we compare it to larger chains like Cardano, for an example, because it would take, I think now it's like 8, 9 years to get to the same supply. But is there any changes that possibly could be proposed in the future? I know validators are the main ones that really kind of control that.
Listen, there's two parts to that, right? One, there is the sort of the crypto security or token security aspect to it, and that needs to be modeled out. The other part of it is like that shouldn't be a decision that's made by a central entity, right? So
Hmm.
I'm not going to make a change to it. The board is not going to make a change to it. But we're putting the rails in place where the network could decide that. And that hasn't really been practically possible, right? Up until now. Always, I think the company line was, yeah, make a proposal, like a CEP as it was called, and then somebody will pick it up. But that wasn't practical. So
Hmm.
um, if there is a push for that, it's now going to be practical that the network can vote on that and implement it. But I think before we do, we should take a very good look at what it means. And I think on the one hand, I agree with you that it's not as big of an issue as perhaps some people make it out to be. Uh, on the other hand, having a high APY or effective APY is a nice to have for a network,
Hmm.
particularly in the context of DeFi and liquid staking and things like that, right? So those are things that, as a network, we'll have to weigh and come to a conclusion on. But I mean, getting 3% or less on ETH is I don't find that particularly compelling, especially where the TradFi interest markets are, right? So it's I think it's a bigger discussion, and I look forward for like all the stakeholders in the network to participate in that and ultimately decide it.
Yeah, I also think a lot of the big problems with inflation is anyone in crypto, they hear the word inflation and they're running away. They don't want anything to do with inflation, but I feel as though a lot of people kind of avoid the big elephant in the room when it comes to, staking, which is the fact that, we get into crypto to, get to the point where we can earn more than the this traditional percentage APY on our money. And when we're
Yeah,
thinking about staking, yeah, we do have a huge opportunity to not only secure the network but also earn passive income by securing the network. And if we're thinking about long term, say for so 5 years down the road, this space is massively adopted and Casper is much larger, those passive income rewards all of a sudden become, financially freeing to some people.
yeah, can't really add much more to that.
So with Casper 2.0, what is roughly the expected go live timeframe? I know recently there was a few major updates around Casper 2.0. Do you have any specific ETA on that?
Sure, I'll try and be as specific as possible, but and also caveat that. So we actually wrapped up feature development on Casper 2.0 less than 2 weeks ago, which is really a major milestone for the project because that sort of was um, a target that sort of kept being over the horizon for like I want to say like a year and a half, maybe longer, which was unfortunate. So we've really rallied around getting to that target, and now we're finally there, right? So there's no more features going into Casper 2.0. We're code complete. We're doing testing. I think we're in a sprint right now where we have four bugs that are being resolved by the end of next week, and that's it. Um, so the process of getting that from sort of code completion to mainnet release is as follows. So we have a development network, a DevNet, that gets updated with the most recent version of Casper 2.0 on a regular basis. That's currently live and being used by developers. There's a parallel testing process going on. There is downstream compatibility work being done, right? So the node and the protocol may be finished, but there are tools like SDKs and what we call the sidecar, which is the RPC interface to the node, that are being brought up to compatibility with the latest version of the node. Um, and then there is a rollout that looks as follows. So it goes from DevNet to integration network, which we hope to do here in the next few weeks. I'm not entirely sure whether that will happen before the Christmas break or in like the first 1, 2 weeks of January, but it's definitely on the very near term horizon. At that point, you have a full sort of full copy of an ecosystem that's running on Casper 2.0, even though it's small. But it's a network that will get upgraded from 1.x to 2.0, which is sort of a trial run for what comes next, right?
Hmm.
Typically, in the past, in the 1x world, We would spend about a week on integration network, and then a week later we would go to testnet. I imagine in sort of this major upgrade scenario, it might be 2 or 3 weeks because it's such a major upgrade.
Mhm.
Then we'll hit testnet, and that's when you're really dealing with a network that's almost sort of equivalent to mainnet. It's decentralized. There's 100 validators all over the world. There's people developing against it. There's smart contracts being called against it. It sees a lot of activity.
Mhm.
That'll be sort of the staging ground and the trial run for the mainnet upgrade. So if we do sort of a worst case scenario based on the timelines that I just laid out, let's say like it's not before Christmas, but the second week of January integration network, let's say 3 weeks later to testnet, we'll put you in early February. Then I would imagine that by the end of February or maybe the first week of March, you're looking at a mainnet upgrade. And that's me doing right now, sort of back up the napkin sort of predictions. The only other element or aspect to that is you have to make sure that a critical mass of the ecosystem is ready for the upgrade, right? Like if you switch on 2.0 on mainnet and none of the exchanges work anymore, for example, that would be an issue. So we're working in parallel with all the downstream parties, developers, exchanges, etc., anybody who interfaces with the network to make sure that they're ready to go when we turn on 2.0.
So if all goes well, the end of quarter one, 2025, we should expect
Yes.
2.0. Awesome.
Yeah.
So I'm going to ask the last two questions here because they kind of go hand in hand. Number one is there going to be an up-to-date roadmap of what holders should be on the lookout for the next 12 months? And with Casper 2.0 finally, almost here, what can we expect to see going forward for the entire ecosystem?
Okay. So the short answer is yes to the roadmap question. Here's where we are. So the entire team is focused on getting to Casper 2.0 out. That's the end all be all of what we do every day, right? And we don't want to detract from that. Part of the reason why, as I mentioned earlier in this conversation, we moved away from these nebulous sort of named releases like Condor and Peregrine and whatever else was come up with in the past is to move to a semantic versioning scheme, which is essentially, for those who are not in software engineering, like 2.0, major, minor, and patch releases, right? So 2.0, 2.01, 2.10, etc. And what that allows you to do is to take your backlog of features and map it against future releases, right? So we are going to go through a process of evaluating our backlog, prioritizing it, and saying feature A is going to go in 2.1, feature B is going to go in 2.2, etc. And obviously make that publicly available via our GitHub so that everybody can see what's coming and when. And once we're past this major upgrade of 2.0, we expect to have regular releases again with that basically execute on the roadmap that we put out.
Awesome.
Uh, what else did you ask? You asked about what else to look forward to, right? So
The overall
um,
outlook with Casper 2.0, finally being here, what can we expect to see for the entire ecosystem with this upgrade?
so we're definitely focused on, and I think you called this out earlier as well, efficiency, right? So we're launching a new consensus protocol, Zook, which is significantly more efficient in its algorithm. We're starting it off slowly, meaning we'll launch with 16-second blocks. But what Zook does away with is sort of the limitations that we had in Highway. One of the limitations was that block speed could only be increased exponentially. You can go from 16 to 8 to 4 to 2, etc. Zook has essentially flexible block speed, meaning there is no there are no steps. You can essentially go as fast or as slow as the network supports. And the network will support a whole lot more than it does now because the algorithm is so much more efficient. So we're looking forward to sort of taking the sort of the side wheels off of Zook and see how fast it can really go. And some of these features that I think we've, as an ecosystem, been really excited about: the gasless transactions, the account and contract merger, which is basically a form of account abstraction. We're going to start putting those to the test, starting with 2.1 and onwards. So a lot of exciting new features coming to the network.
Awesome to hear. Well, Michael, I don't want to eat up more of your time. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I'm very happy to see all of these moves being made, especially as a Casper holder. An overall supporter of the project. I could definitely see that it is in good hands now, and I think that almost everyone that is going to watch this AMA is also going to be agreeing with me on that. So I definitely want to thank you for your time. I know that you are busy, and I know that you have a lot going on. So I just want to say that I appreciate it, and you guys are doing great work.
Thank you. Pleasure is all mine, and keep up the good work. It's exciting.
Sounds good. Well, I'll definitely
Thank
look
you.
forward to talking to you again in the future. Hopefully, we can revisit this and really kind of
Absolutely.
look back on it. All right, Michael.
Sounds good. You know where to find me.
Sounds good. Have a great night.
Thank you too. Take care.